Tonight, the Nolan Wells investigation into the death of a shining star, Nolan Wells, has an altercation witness emerged. A witness that claims she saw an altercation at Horn Island.
Nancy Grace ran a full episode of Crime Stories on the Nolan Wells case, and a lot came out of it. A woman came forward saying she witnessed an altercation on Horn Island. A forensics expert broke down what the second autopsy did and did not find. A defense attorney explained how Mississippi's grand jury system actually works in a death case, and that explanation changes how you should be reading this entire investigation. There was also a claim going around that the case has been reclassified as criminal, and that claim did not survive the hour. I am going to go through all of it with you. Before I start, two things. Nobody has been charged with anything in this case. Not one person. Everyone discussed on that broadcast is a witness, a bystander, or somebody who gave a statement to law enforcement voluntarily. I am not going to name private individuals who have not been charged, and I would ask you not to name them in the comments either. The cause of death has not been released. 2 autopsies have been performed. The state's autopsy is reportedly complete. The findings are not public. So anybody telling you how Nolan Wells died, including anybody on that broadcast and including me, is giving you an opinion and not a finding. Here is what is actually established.
A Nolan Wells phone evidence torpedo.
2 confirmed witnesses that saw Nolan Wells on the island around 6 p.m. The Triton, as you said, left around 4:30.
What witnesses? Where? Who, what, where, why, and when?
I have not spoken publicly about this before, but I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells from a boat nearby. What I saw has stayed with me, and I believe it's important information. I have provided or intend to provide my account to the appropriate investigators because Nolan's family deserves the truth. Out of respect for the ongoing investigation, I won't speculate beyond what I personally observed. While I was on the boat near the area, I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells and several other individuals. I saw what appeared to be an argument that escalated after there was a dispute involving Nolan's phone. I heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore, and I observed a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. I also observed a young woman telling them to stop. At that point, I left the area because the situation had appeared to be getting worse. I did not remain long enough to witness what happened afterward. Everything beyond what I personally observed would be speculation, so I cannot honestly say what occurred after I left. Then she said she messaged one of the individuals that she saw, "Hey, I just want to say I was a passenger on another boat and I saw the argument between you guys and will go to the police with this information. I also have video footage. My husband doesn't show much, but it shows the argument that was taken and how you guys were upset at Nolan because of the young lady."
That from Secret Service Sam on TikTok. Okay. How is this helping the investigation? I'm trying to make sense of so many people online making comments. Now, if this is true, if there is a witness who has a husband with her on the boat and they took a certain amount of video, it could change everything, especially if the video is time stamped. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney Philip Dubay joining me. He's joining us out of LA, formerly in the public defender's office. They try a ton of cases. Philip, first of all, has she turned it into police? She said she was. If she hasn't, I give her no credibility at all. Look, I want this to be true. Why? Because I want the video. I want to see the timestamp on the video. I want to see, was he still on Horn Island at 4:30 when his acquaintances on the Triton boat left? I want that video. And if she hasn't brought this forward to LE, law enforcement, then it means nothing to me. I mean, if I know a young man turns up dead in the water And I know there's a controversy surrounding this. I mean, we know she knows that because she's gone online and posted it. Then why not hand it over to police?
Agreed. And it should go to the grand jury for part of their investigation. But I got to tell you, if I were cross-examining her, should this even go to trial, the first question I'd ask her on that 4th of July, what she had been drinking. Before that video got activated, everybody would want to
please,
what
put him up.
drinking and smoking. You know how many people were partying
Okay, man.
out?
Have you lost your mind? You defend criminal cases. I bet everybody you put on the stand has either been high, drunk, or worse during the altercation. Well, every witness is not a nun, a priest, or a virgin. Everybody on Horn Island was drinking, man. What are you talking about? I don't care if she took a drink. I want the video.
You want the truth, is what you want. You want the truth. And let's be
and that
clear,
would be the video.
remember, Nancy,
Okay.
is not consistent
Brandon
with the
Tatum is joining us. So after all that, all you have to say is, was she drinking? That's your takeaway from that. Joining me is Brandon Tatum, former police officer, Tucson, now star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, who famously has interviewed the acquaintances who all say they had nothing to do with it. Let's just put that out there. He's interviewed them extensively. I want to talk about not what you want to talk about, Brandon Tatum, which is they had nothing to do with this, because I met them and I believe them. So noted. Can we talk about a potential witness to an altercation? And she seems to suggest it was over Katie. Why? Don't know what the altercation was. Maybe it was, hey, leave her alone and get on the boat. Or leave her alone, she's my girlfriend. Or it could be anything. But if there is a witness placing Nolan seemingly in the water, I can't tell that, but having an argument with another person, a partier at Horn Island, that is significant. It could prove or disprove your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever. Nobody that I've talked to have alluded that this altercation was real. And also Katie, whom I saw her text messages, she didn't even say this altercation occurred. What I will say is that if I was an investigator in this investigation, I want to hear that. I want to be able to compare that information to other things that we may have or other witness statements. But I don't think it's significant because it doesn't show if Nolan Wells was actually killed in that altercation. She's claiming that there was an altercation between him arguing with somebody else. There was a potential fight, but that doesn't get me to how did he drown? How did he get in the water? And how did he not recover and come home to his family? So I would take that into consideration. I would compare that to the other interviews that I've done, but I don't think it's significant whatsoever. However, I would be incredibly skeptical because there's no other statements that I've heard from anybody that comes even close to an altercation with Nolan Wells and others over a girl.
Number one, he's dead shortly after an alleged altercation with another male. We think over a woman. See, in my world, I put together both circumstantial and direct evidence. Direct evidence would be, for instance, DNA or a fingerprint. Circumstantial evidence is the timing of the alleged altercation and his death. Right?
Nancy,
so
but Nancy,
it's hard for me to believe that there's some kind of altercation on Horn Island just before he dies. And they were not connected. That's hard for me to believe that.
Well, Nancy, she's not saying he lost the fight. She's not saying that he got beat up. If you look at the autopsy, there's no clear signs of blunt force trauma to his face or any of the vital areas that could kill him. So it doesn't appear that there's any indication that he lost a fight, that there was enough trauma in this particular fight that would lead to his death. And when you look at the autopsy, there is no blunt force trauma to his face. There is no lacerations or damages to the back of his head. This is redness that was underneath the skin.
Oh, wait, are you looking at the screen? Because I'm looking at a big red mark on the back of his head.
Yeah, but this is underneath the skin. This is not a big red gash that's in the back of his head, which would be consistent with blunt force trauma. This is something that occurred underneath the skin that could have been from pooling of blood after his death due to,
Okay, I need to explain something,
I'll let the experts talk about specifics, but it doesn't appear that
okay, let's do
there
that.
is any
But I
blunt
want
force
everyone
trauma
to
consistent.
understand why Officer Tatum is here. Officer Tatum and Philip Dubé and others on our panel tonight are taking a particular side, right? It's called cross-examination, and it is similar to what happens in court. A theory emerges, a line of questioning emerges, and the other side tests it with fire under cross-examination. And then, hopefully, you get to the truth. Right now, we're talking about an alleged eyewitness to an altercation just before Nolan Wells is dead.
Nolan Wells went to Horn Island on the 4th of July. He did not come home. His body was recovered from the water on July 6th. 2 autopsies have been performed. The results have not been released, and the elected district attorney in Jackson County, Mississippi, has confirmed she will present the case to a grand jury. That is the entire list of settled facts. Everything else is disputed. If you are new to the channel, subscribe. We are following this case through to whatever the grand jury decides. Let's start with the witness, because that is what the episode was built around. A woman came forward saying she was a passenger on a boat near Horn Island that day and that she saw an altercation involving Nolan Wells. Her account, as read on the broadcast, goes like this. She saw an argument involving Nolan and several other people. The argument escalated after a dispute over a phone. She heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore. She then saw a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. She saw a young woman telling them to stop. She left the area because the situation looked like it was getting worse, and she says she does not know what happened after that. A few things stand out about that statement. The first is where it ends. She does not tell you how the fight finished. She says that anything past the point she left would be speculation, and she was not going to speculate. That is unusual. When people invent a story for attention, the story almost always has an ending because the ending is the point. This one just stops in the middle. That does not make it true. It could still be an honest mistake or an honest citing of the wrong people entirely, but it is worth noticing that the account is not shaped to accuse anybody of causing his death. She never says he lost the fight. She never says he was hurt. She never links the fight to what happened afterwards. If somebody set out to construct a story that gets people arrested, that is not the story they would construct. The second thing that stands out is the phone. She describes the argument starting over a dispute involving a phone, and she says she heard him yelling for it back. That is a specific and very ordinary detail. It is not the kind of thing you invent when you are trying to sound dramatic. Phone evidence has been one of the open questions in this case from early on. So a stranger independently describing an argument about a phone is either a coincidence or it is not, and neither of those possibilities is boring. The third thing is that none of it is verified, not one piece. We do not know who she is. We do not know how far away she was. We do not know whether she has actually given a statement to investigators or when. She says she has or intends to. That is not confirmation. Then there is the message. She says her husband recorded video from the boat. She says it does not show much, but that it shows the argument. And she says she messaged one of the individuals she saw directly, telling them she was there, that she saw the argument, and that she would be taking the information to police. There are 2 ways to read that message, and I cannot tell you which is correct. The innocent reading is the human one. She saw something ugly, later heard that a young man had died, and reached out to the person she recognized because she was unsettled and wanted to know whether she had seen what she thought she saw. People do that constantly. The other reading is that she was letting somebody know what she had in her possession. That is a very different thing. You cannot separate those two from a screenshot. Neither can I, and neither can anybody in your comment section who is telling you they can. What I can tell you is what that video would be worth if it exists and if it is what she says it is. A timestamp. That is the whole value of it, because the central dispute in this case is a timing question. The group left the island at around 4:30 in the afternoon. There are reports of Nolan being seen on the island closer to 6. If he was still on that island after those boats left, that changes who could plausibly have been involved in anything. If he was not, that changes it as well. Every single argument in this case traces back to that gap. A time-stamped video of an argument on that shoreline would close part of it, and nothing else discussed on that broadcast can.
If she has not handed this over to the police, it doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. But Tatum has a good idea, and that is, let's let an expert discuss it. To Joseph Scott Morgan, death investigator, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University. You can see him now on a hit podcast. It's on YouTube, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Joe Scott, if there had been not a blunt force trauma that Officer Tatum is describing, but a fist fight, if there had been a fist fight, plus body in water for multiple days, body decomposition, would you expect to see red marks on the hands at that juncture, on the face? What would you expect if there had been a fisticuffs?
Yeah, you would see, well, first off, above discolored areas, like consistent with contusions. If there are facial strikes or just body blows, you can actually see abraded areas over the surface of his fingers. And these are very subtle sometimes. And if there is decomposition, which we believe there is, particularly per the second autopsy that was performed, he didn't make note of this. And can I go one more step with this? And this is kind of graphic, but people need to understand this. This physician that did the second autopsy actually did what's referred to as a coronal sectioning of the face. So there were multiple incisions made into Nolan's face in this autopsy, this second autopsy. And this guy didn't see anything. He didn't see anything that was of import relative or indicative of blunt force trauma. And I would think that if there was contact, particularly if he's fighting a group of people, these sorts of things, you're going to have injuries probably on the leading edges, or what we refer to as the blade of the arm right here on the forearm, the back of the hands, the knuckles, those points of contact. And certainly if there's facial strikes going on with him, which we find with blunt force trauma many times with fisticuffs, as you say, you'll see these strikes, you'll see marks on the face. There's nothing to indicate that in the second autopsy. Now, what the state has, I don't know, but I do know this. I know they're saying they're done with the autopsy and that it's complete, which means the gross findings in the autopsy room, the tox, the histology, that means that autopsy report is complete. They just hadn't released their findings yet.
And speaking of that, Joe Scott Morgan, I've heard the same, that the autopsy is complete.
Yeah.
There are reports that there is no cocaine in Nolan's system. That's uncorroborated reports,
Okay.
but a good source. No cocaine in the system.
Yep.
Joe Scott, when the body has been in the elements, such as the water, for that long, how can I confirm if he had been drinking or not?
Oh, you can still pull a BA, blood alcohol, or blood ethanol level, as it's referred to. And again, Nancy, we're not talking about someone that has been down for weeks and weeks. We can still do the BA, and it can come from urine, blood. We can still draw urine and find it pretty effectively. You'll have what's referred to as qualitative. We've talked about this before, and I know you understand that. But so our friends understand, you have a qualitative amount, which they say, yes, it is present. And then you have a quantitative amount where they do the measurement of the BAC, the blood alcohol content. Just think about DWI, DUI, wherever you're from, those levels. And then we get up to those lethal levels. That's really what I'm interested in relative. And yeah, I'm interested in any of the other toxicological findings you might have relative to anything illicit or illicit drugs, but particularly with alcohol, because that has been kind of this thing that has been said over and over and over again. Well, let me see it. I want to know what the blood alcohol level was like. And historically, I would like to know what his level of experience has been with alcohol. As you well know, because of cases you've worked on in the past, Nancy, if you're a lightweight, if you've never had anything to drink and you start taking on copious amounts of alcohol, and you're kind of a neophyte in this area, it can have very, very lethal outcomes.
Let me understand. Joe Scott Morgan joining us, star of Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan on YouTube and Death Investigator. When I'm asking you, even if the body has been in the elements for a period of days, can I still get a blood alcohol? Maybe not from urine, but you certainly can't do a blood test. But can you take human tissue from one of the organs and extract a blood alcohol from human tissue?
It'd be very difficult. Generally, the liver is the best candidate. We'll spin that down. We'll take a section of it, spin it down, and liquefy it. But again, I submit to you, Nancy, that he has not been down long enough to compromise the ability to get at least
Get
a
a
quantitative amount. Yeah, to get a BA.
Okay. To Philip Dubé joining me, a veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney out of the LA jurisdiction. I'm not quite sure why you're so focused on who had been drinking. Let's take a look at the video. Let me answer that for you. Everybody was drinking. Okay, everybody had a snootful. So, even someone drinking can see an altercation, Dubé.
No, of course you can. And I can see that crowd of people out there. It was a bustling, hot 4th of July afternoon. But who's to say that the people that she saw included Nolan Wells? And that's why you got to get into her ability to perceive and recollect being impacted by intoxicants such as alcohol. I would want to know if she had imbibed. I really would. Not to mention, the autopsy findings thus far do not reflect any type of physical insults or injury to his body. At most, what you have are
I'm asking
signs.
you about your fixation on the witness having been drinking. Joe Scott Morgan has already addressed the body. I'm talking to you about the alleged witness.
Yeah. If she had in fact been drinking, I do believe, unless they really have a video showing him in HD quality, showing that he was in a fight, then I would call her ability to perceive, recollect, and even state that there was an altercation going on in her presence.
You know, Brandon Tatum joining us, Officer Tatum on YouTube. I've cross-examined a lot of witnesses, and I cross-examined them exactly on that. How far away were you? Did you know the target? Were you familiar with them? Was your vision obstructed by anything? Were you wearing glasses? Were you wearing sunglasses? What time of the day? I mean, I could go on and on and on. But unless you have a nun, a priest, or a virgin on the stand, or maybe Angel Gabriel might come down and testify, you have to take your witness as you find them. And I'm sure you've had a lot of drunk witnesses in Tucson, to everything from a bar fight to a murder to a dope deal. Look, I'd say a good 50% of witnesses were drunk at one time or the other. That doesn't mean they didn't see what they saw.
Well, from a law enforcement perspective, this is not cross-examination on the stand. This is us, what I would deal with a witness is right on the scene. And I'm not too concerned of whether the person is drunk or not. I'm not going to test their blood alcohol level on the scene. I want to know specifically, what did you see? What are the identifying markers that you have to say that this is Nolan? If that person can describe them, maybe we'll do a show up. If we have like a video or a picture or something, we could show them and say, hey, does this match the person you think that was here? Then we'll have a good perspective. But there is a challenge here, because you do have to identify him. You can't just say it was a black man out there with curly hair and I think it was Nolan. You're going to have some clear identifying markers that this is Nolan, and then you have to identify the people he was fighting with and the girl. And I think this person is going to have a big challenge. I saw this text message. We reached out to the girl on her social media. She never responded to us. I don't know if she ever really sent it in to the police, but it is problematic, in my opinion, if she hasn't. If you're going to say somebody is going to spend time in jail, or you're alluding to the fact they've committed a crime, and the fact now that we know that Nolan did not survive being out there at Horn Island, and you never submitted that to law enforcement, there's a potential that's tampering with evidence. If you have evidence of a crime and you're withholding that from law enforcement, and you knowingly and intentionally are doing that, that could be very problematic for a person who claimed to be a witness.
No. Morally, it's wrong, but there is no duty under the law that you have to report yourself as a witness, that you have to volunteer information. You can stand on the side of a pool and watch somebody drown and do nothing unless you have a fiduciary capacity, and it's not a crime in our jurisprudence. So nothing is compelling her under the law to come forward. However, interesting, she did post it. She did identify herself. She did say she was going to police, and that would be my first line of cross. Did you take this to the police? And if she said no, all HELL break out in that courtroom. If you have information like this and you don't go to the police,
Nancy,
fur would fly. Fur would fly. You ever seen a dog fight? That's what I mean by that. Fur would fly. So that would be a line of cross-exam. Hold on, something else. Before I go out to Susan Hendricks, Jeff Shetler, and Ben Dobrin, now information that there is, in fact, a criminal investigation.
Hearing that somebody who has an inside source is saying the DA's office in Mississippi is now looking at the Nolan Wells case as a criminal investigation and no longer an accidental drowning. Now, we can only pray that this is true. Obviously, we can't celebrate. We can't get excited at all because I have not seen Ben Crump announce this. It is not being reported by any other major media sources, but there are rumblings.
From Sam Crouppen. All right. I would like to point out that his source is a, quote, little birdie. Little birdies are saying that an inside source says the DA's office is now looking into the Nolan Wells as a criminal investigation. I can't put that up on the stand. Susan Hendricks joining me, investigative journalist and author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. Susan, you get laughed out of court if your witness said, a little birdie told me. Number one, that's hearsay, but a little birdie?
Yeah, exactly. It makes me wonder, did that woman, those text messages about some sort of altercation, is the grand jury analyzing this as we speak? Because finally the DA came out and said, look, I can't release anything that's going on, but let it be clear, and I'm paraphrasing, that we are investigating this with a grand jury.
Susan Hendricks, you're absolutely right. She states most recently, this is the elected district attorney, my obligation and commitment is to present the grand jury with all the evidence collected in the case in order for them to reach a decision based on a thorough investigation, complete evidence presentation, the actual truth, and an understanding of the law. I'm obligated to do so in keeping with the law and the rules of the court. She goes on to state, I stand firmly on the rule of law and my ethical obligation. That is what the people of Jackson County elected me to do. I will present the grand jury with a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. Now, is there a criminal investigation? According to some sources, there is. We keep hearing there is no criminal investigation. To Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, what is the truth of it tonight?
Nancy, it hasn't been announced that there's a criminal investigation, but it just stands to reason that they are doing a full investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. At this point, we don't have a cause of death, Nancy. They have not released the reports on the autopsy that was done by the state, completed weeks ago. We don't know anything. Nothing's been released. So whether they're doing a criminal investigation or not, I think it stands to reason they are investigating to every piece of evidence they can find to determine what happened and what they can present, they being investigators, to the grand jury.
Now, the pushback on the witness. Philip Dubé, the defense attorney on the panel, was asked what he would do with her, and he said the first thing he would ask on cross-examination is what she had been drinking that day. That got a strong reaction, and I think most of the reaction is aimed at the wrong thing. He is a defense attorney. He answered honestly. He would go after her ability to perceive and remember, and drinking is the standard opening move. That is not an insult to her personally. That is what defense attorneys do to every witness in every case, and it is what they are supposed to do. Where he goes too far is treating it as decisive. Nancy's response is the correct one. You take witnesses as you find them. It was the 4th of July on a barrier island with a reported 60 or more people out there. Alcohol was in that scene somewhere, and probably in most of it. If drinking disqualified testimony, most bar fight cases in this country would collapse before they started. Intoxication goes to how much weight a jury gives an account. It does not make the account inadmissible. The jury hears about it and decides for itself. But underneath the drinking question, there was a much stronger objection, and it nearly got lost. Identification. Brandon Tatum put it plainly. You cannot simply say you saw a black man out there with curly hair and conclude that it was Nolan. That is the real weakness in this account, and it has nothing to do with alcohol. Think about the practical situation. She was on a boat. There was distance between her and the shore. It was a crowded holiday afternoon. She was watching an argument between people she did not know and had no reason to be paying close attention to until it escalated. So how does she know that was Nolan Wells specifically? That is not a hostile question. It is the first question any competent investigator asks. What was he wearing? How close were you? Was your view obstructed? Did you see his face clearly? Can you pick him out of a photograph? Can you also identify the other people in the fight? Because you will need to. If she can answer those clearly, this account becomes serious. If she cannot, it does not matter how honest she is, because honest people misidentify strangers all the time and always have. Tatum handled that part the way a police officer would, and he was right to. He said he would not be testing anybody's blood alcohol at the scene. He would want to know what identifying markers she can give and whether she can confirm against a photo. That is the correct process, and it is more useful than the cross-examination angle. Where I do disagree with him is on significance. His position is that even if there was an altercation, it does not explain how Nolan Wells ended up in the water, so it is not significant. That is half right. A fight does not by itself explain a death in water, but that is not what makes information significant during an investigation. If a disputed event happens in the same place shortly before a death, that sequence has to be accounted for by any theory of what happened. It does not prove the two are connected. It means that an explanation which treats them as unrelated now has something to explain. That is exactly why you chase it down instead of setting it aside. There is also a limit to his stated reason for doubting the account. He says he has not heard about this altercation from anybody he has spoken to. That is fair as far as it goes. But the people he has spoken to are a specific group of people. If the woman making this claim is not in that group, the fact that they have not mentioned it does not disprove her. I am not saying he is wrong to be skeptical. Skepticism is the right posture here. I am saying that particular reason is weaker than it sounded on air. Tell me in the comments where you land on this one. Is the altercation account worth chasing, or is it noise? I read the comments on these. Now the forensics, which was the most useful part of the whole episode. Joseph Scott Morgan, the death investigator on the panel, explained what a physical fight typically leaves behind on a body, and I want to translate it because he said it quickly and in professional shorthand. When somebody is in a fight, the body usually records it in predictable places. Discolored areas consistent with bruising, scraped areas across the surfaces of the fingers, marks along the outer edge of the forearm because that is what people raise to block a punch, marks on the knuckles and the backs of the hands because those are the points of contact when you throw one, and marks on the face if the face was struck. That is the pattern he would expect to see, particularly if somebody was fighting more than one person at once. He then says that according to the second autopsy, that pattern was not documented. He notes that the physician who performed it carried out a detailed examination of the facial tissues, which goes deeper than a surface inspection and is specifically done to find injury that would not be visible from the outside. And he says nothing indicating blunt force injury was noted. There was also discussion of the mark visible on the back of the head. The position taken on the broadcast is that what is visible there is discoloration beneath the skin rather than an open wound, and that pooling of blood after death can produce that appearance. All of that is meaningful. If you are following this case honestly, you have to take it seriously rather than skip past it, because it points the wrong way for your theory. But there are 3 limits on it. The first is decomposition, and Morgan raises it himself. The body was in warm water for roughly 2 days, and decomposition was present. Decomposition degrades exactly the kind of subtle findings he just described. Bruising becomes unreadable early. So the absence of a subtle finding after time in water is weaker evidence than the absence of that finding on a fresh examination would be. The second is that the witness account does not actually claim he was beaten. She describes a fight. She does not say he was overwhelmed, knocked down, or injured. Most physical scuffles between young men leave nothing detectable 3 days later, in water, in summer. The third is the largest, and nobody said it plainly. Everybody is discussing the second autopsy. The state's autopsy is reportedly complete and has not been released. Every forensic conversation happening in public right now, including that broadcast and including this video, is taking place around a document that none of us have read. On toxicology, Morgan was clear and useful. Despite the time in the water, a usable result is still obtainable. He explains the difference between a qualitative finding, which tells you a substance is present, and a quantitative finding, which tells you how much. He says, a quantitative blood alcohol figure should still be reachable here, because the body was not submerged long enough to rule it out. Where the usual samples are compromised, liver tissue is the standard fallback. He then makes a point I think is underrated. He says he would want to know the person's history with alcohol, not just the number on the report, because the same reading means different things for different people. Somebody who rarely drinks and takes on a large volume in a short period is in a very different physical situation than a regular drinker with the identical level. That is not a judgment about him as a person, it is pharmacology, and it matters to any theory that involves water. There was also a mention of uncorroborated reports about the absence of a particular substance in the toxicology. Nancy Grace flagged those as uncorroborated herself when she said them.
I understand the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but we are not taking time for time's sake. We are taking the time required to complete the work this investigation demands. Since Nolan was reported missing, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires. Our responsibility to Nolan and our community is to complete this investigation thoroughly, carefully, without compromise, supported by the evidence and worthy of the confidence of the people we serve. I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation in the grand jury proceeding.
And tonight, more rumblings that the wrong boat was searched.
The MDMR report states that the searched vessel was called a Tide craft, right? On July 8th. But witnesses show he used a Tide line boat on July 4th. In the MDMR report, right down at the bottom in the yellow, it says Tide craft, not Tide line.
From Sam Crouppen to Ben Dobrin, emergency response diving instructor and trainer. Ben, thank you for being with us. What about the mistake in the name of the boat, if it was in fact a mistake? And could that explain any problem in getting GPS information?
Well, absolutely, because they're two different brands of boats. It's like saying, I'm going to search a Ford, and then you go out and search a Chevrolet in a car. They're very different brands of boats. And so if they were searching the wrong boat, then any information on that boat would be the wrong information. So if you're going after the GPS plotter on the Chevrolet, but you want the GPS plotter off of the Ford, they have no bearing. And so if you're searching the incorrect boat, you have incorrect evidence.
To Brandon Tatum, star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, we just saw some video from your show. And I'm trying to figure out, among other things, what time and day, if you have a time and a date stamp on that, that seemingly shows the Triton with a lot of people on it leaving the island, leaving Horn Island. Do you have a timestamp on that?
I don't have the timestamp. I can ask them to see if they can get it to me. When I watched this video and they presented it to me, this was during the time that the CETO call was occurring. So it had to have been right around that time. You could see Wyatt on the boat on the phone. And so this is how it was presented to me. And just to kind of answer your question about the boat searches, you know, it's partially irrelevant depending on the investigation and the interviews that they've done. There is no indication that there was a crime committed on any one of these boats. When you have 60 people that have already given statements to law enforcement, you have the young men that I interviewed that were on their boat that left the island, and then you have people that saw Nolan on the island after they had left. It's no indication that Nolan was on any one of those boats at any point in time and that a murder occurred on those boats. So regardless if they searched them or not, you know, it was offered up for them to use a cadaver dog, but that never occurred. And so I don't really think that the boat situation or search is significant. The boys submitted their Life 360, which is how they got a GPS tracking of when they left the island and how they got from point A to point B, where they docked and all of those things. So all of the information has been concluded, or at least have been explored, and it didn't appear that there was any foul play on any one of the boats.
Okay. Officer Tatum, I respect everything that you just said, but to have a witness tell me it's true because I said so, and because my friends say so, that doesn't mean it's true to me.
This is GPS.
It could be true.
They
And I
provided.
see
They provided Life
GPS. That
360.
doesn't tell me what happened to Nolan. Just because they
No,
got
I'm saying
GPS,
they provided
that
Life
they
360,
came back.
which is they provided Life 360. They provided the CETO call, and you can put those two things together and say, okay, the timeline matches. And if they left at 4:30, they were already gone. All three boats that came out were already gone when Nolan was last seen. So now you have a timeline that's consistent with evidence that they presented.
Right there. I was going with you until you said the time Nolan was last seen. Because their GPS data, I'm sure, is correct. And their Life 360 data, I'm sure, is correct. I'm not arguing with the technology. But what happened just before that? Where was Nolan when they're leaving the island? If you can place him on that island at 5 or 6 o'clock, please do it. And then I will turn attention elsewhere. I'm not trying to hang your friends, the people that you have interviewed. And I respect that you believe them, and maybe you're right. If he can be placed on that island at 5 or 6 o'clock, then they're in the clear. But I want to know who's placing them there, him there, and how.
reports have come out that there's two reliable witnesses. TMZ reported on this. They said they saw Nolan a little bit before 6 p.m. There was also the young lady, Katie, who sent text messages to one of the boys that I interviewed. I saw the text messages where she alluded to the fact that she did not see Nolan get on the boat. She heard the boys yelling for Nolan to get on the boat. So Nolan never got back on the boat that he came on. So you have the boats leaving. You have a CETO call. You have testimony from everybody on the boat. And all of those things have to be taken in consideration. Also, they have already spoke to law enforcement about this. Them talking to me in the interview is them just telling the world what they told law enforcement. If there was any indication whatsoever that he was on the boat based on the testimony that was given from the boys or anybody else, even this new witness that have come forward, I think that there would be a significant investigation leading to an immediate arrest. But they clearly don't have any clear evidence that there is a crime that is committed, and especially a crime that was committed from the boys that I interviewed. I can't speak for everybody else, but I know the young men that I talked to, they were gone. There's no indication that Nolan was on the boat whatsoever. They're giving statements. Katie gave a statement. Even this person is claiming that they saw Nolan get into a fist fight. It appears that this person is claiming that the fight has happened after Wyatt and the rest of them had left on the boat.
Hi guys, Nancy Grace here. Please join us on Crime Stories and stream it first on Fox 1. When breaking crime news develops, we investigate it and bring it to you. Bombshell updates, answers to unanswered questions from cases making the headlines and cases you may never have heard of until Crime Stories. We go inside investigations with exclusive interviews, crime victims, families seeking justice, investigators, experts, and sources from within the case itself. Stay on top of the nation's biggest trials with us, including gavel-to-gavel coverage with real-time analysis. Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Stream it first on Fox 1. I hope to see you there, and thank you, friend. Ben Dobrin joining us, emergency response diving instructor. What do you think regarding the boats, not just the Triton, but the other two boats that traveled with it?
My question is, where did he go in the water? They got him out of the water, obviously, on July 6th. But my question is, where did he go in the water and when did he get into the water? Was it a drowning? Bodies behave differently underwater, whether it's a drowning or it was a killing elsewhere. There's a lot of different variables. The body washed up very close to where he was last seen. There's a lot of current in that area. If it was a drowning, people generally sink when they drown. But if you don't drown and you're put in the water, you're more likely to float. And so there's a lot of variables that come into play of where the body was recovered versus where the body went in. And the timeline also, 2 days, if the body had been in the water for 2 days, that does lead to decomposition. The water temperature is around 85 to 88 degrees. That's very warm water, a lot of bacterial growth. And so a lot of different variables in play of where the body went in, where it came out, and the when. Those are my questions. He's an athletic young man. He's very muscular. Muscles sink in the water, fat floats. And so if he drowned, he was probably going to be on the bottom for a while. And if it was 2 days, that makes sense if he drowned and then washed up very close to where he went in. And so to me, that's a big piece of important information is, if he drowned, he was recovered very close to where he was last seen.
But what does that prove?
If he drowned and he floated, because in warm water it takes 2 to 3 days for your body to decompose and float, it proves that he drowned, whether it was somebody holding him underwater or him trying to swim somewhere and wasn't a good swimmer. I have no idea. But we haven't gotten the results from the autopsy, and the autopsy is going to tell us a lot. If he drowned, that's an important piece of information. If he did not drown, that's even more important. You have somebody who was found in the water, his body was found in the water and did not drown. That's a very important piece of information. But if he did drown and they found him in the water, that can open up a lot more avenues for investigation at that point.
Philip Dubé joining us, veteran trial lawyer. Philip, we know because the district attorney has said she is presenting information to a grand jury. There are reports it is a criminal investigation. What do you make of the possibility this is a criminal investigation?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. Jackson County, Mississippi is one of the few jurisdictions in the United States that follows the old Sergeant Code. And what that was back in the day was the days of the coroner inquest, where if you had a violent, sudden, or casual death and they couldn't figure out what happened, you would impanel a jury where the medical examiner or the then appointed or elected coroner elicits testimony from people to try to determine manner and cause of death. What Mississippi did is they abrogated that and created this hybrid sort of coroner's inquest with grand jury investigation, where the grand jury will decide whether or not a death occurred and if there was a crime. And based on that, they can complete the death certificate with the cause and manner of death and decide if they're going to return a true bill of indictment against a suspect.
Is it your belief, Philip Dubé, that the grand jury presenter, and I have presented to literally hundreds of grand juries. That's one of the first things we would do in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Is it your belief that, to a large degree, it depends on the leaning of the presenter? Does the presenter believe a crime occurred? Or does the presenter want a no bill, in other words, no indictment?
It's twofold. They want to determine, first of all, cause and manner of death and if it's a crime. And so they've sort of combined the roles of the grand jury leader, if you will, or the grand jury DA to help the grand jury make both determinations. So it's my opinion right now, they don't know if they even have a homicide. They don't even know the cause of death, but they've lumped in all the causality to criminality just to get it all in one.
Let me rephrase it, Dubé. Will the grand jury typically do what the presenter wants them to do? I mean, haven't you heard the phrase, the grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if the presenter wants them to?
Sure. Yes,
so
they will.
Yes?
But it is.
Okay, so we'll see what happens with this secret grand jury.
Flag them harder. That is a claim about a document from an unnamed source relayed on television. Wait for the report. Then there was the rumor, and I will give the broadcast credit here, because they ran a claim that supported the direction the show was leaning and then took it apart on air. The claim is that an inside source says the district attorney's office is now treating this as a criminal investigation rather than an accidental drowning. The person making the claim attributed it to a little birdie. Nancy's response was that you cannot put that in front of a jury. Susan Hendricks agreed. It is hearsay, and it is not even good hearsay. I want to sit on this for a second because of how information is moving in this case. Somebody with an audience says they have heard something. That becomes a clip. The clip becomes a headline. Within a few hours, it is being repeated as established fact in comment sections, and people are forming hard opinions about who is guilty based on a chain of custody that begins with an unnamed source quoting an unnamed source. Dave Mack gave the sensible answer. No criminal investigation has been announced. But a full investigation into the death is obviously happening because that is what you do when a young man dies and nobody knows why. Investigating a death is not the same thing as reclassifying it, and those two ideas are being blurred together online constantly. Now here is the actual on-the-record information, and it is worth more than every rumor combined. The district attorney has stated that her obligation is to present the grand jury with all of the evidence collected in the case, so they can reach a decision based on a thorough investigation, a complete presentation of the evidence, the actual truth, and an understanding of the law. She said she stands on the rule of law and her ethical obligation, and that she will present a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. She also explained the silence. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict what a prosecutor can release during an investigation. She said the restraint is about protecting the integrity of the investigation and the grand jury proceeding, not about keeping the truth from the public. You are allowed to be frustrated with that. The family is more than allowed to be frustrated with that. But that rule exists in every jurisdiction, and it protects both the case and anybody who has not been charged. Silence at this stage is not evidence of a cover-up. There was also the boat name issue, and it is small and it is not small. The claim raised on the broadcast is that an official report lists the searched vessel under one brand name, while accounts of that day point to a different brand entirely. Ben Dobrin's comparison is the right one. Those are two different manufacturers. It is the difference between searching a Ford and searching a Chevrolet. If you pull navigation data from the wrong boat, you have not gathered weak evidence. You have gathered irrelevant evidence, and you may not know that you have. Two things can be true here. Clerical errors in official reports are common, and most of the time they are exactly what they appear to be. Somebody typed a similar sounding name into a form. That is probably what happened, and I would not build a theory on it. But this is also precisely the kind of detail that becomes very large in a courtroom 18 months later, because it goes to how carefully the underlying investigation was done. A defense attorney does not need to prove the wrong boat was searched. They only need to establish that the paperwork is unreliable enough that a jury cannot be certain about anything built on top of it. Tatum's position is that the boat question does not matter much, because there is no indication a crime occurred on any of those boats. He points to a large number of statements given to law enforcement, location data provided voluntarily, and a marine assistance call that anchors the timeline. That is a reasonable position, and I will say plainly that voluntarily handing over location data is not what people do when they are trying to hide a timeline. That deserves acknowledgement, but there is a gap in it. Location data proves where a device was. It does not prove where every person was. The disputed question in this case is whether Nolan Wells was still on that island after the boats departed. Data showing when the boats left does not answer that question. It answers a different one. Then there was the segment I think will matter most when the report finally lands, and almost nobody is talking about it. Ben Dobrin, the emergency response diving instructor, walked through what the water itself can tell you. Bodies behave differently depending on how they entered the water. People who drown generally sink at first. A body that entered the water without drowning is more likely to stay up. Lean, muscular bodies sink more readily than bodies carrying more fat, which is simple physics. Water temperature in that area at that time was around 85 to 88 degrees, which is very warm, which accelerates the bacterial activity that eventually brings a submerged body back to the surface. In water that warm, he puts that process at roughly 2 to 3 days. Then he sets that against what actually happened. The body was recovered about 2 days later, close to where Nolan was last known to be, in an area with strong current. He is careful not to overstate it, and so am I. He is not saying that pattern proves anything. He is saying it is consistent with a drowning near that location, and that if the autopsy says otherwise, the something else is the story. His closing point is the cleanest thing said in the entire hour. If he drowned, that is important information. If he did not drown, that is more important. A body recovered from water that did not drown is a completely different investigation. The last piece is the one that reframes everything, and it came from Philip Dubé. He explains that Jackson County follows a procedure that grew out of the old coroner's inquest. Historically, where a death was violent, sudden, or unexplained, a panel would hear testimony to determine the manner and cause of death. Mississippi folded that function into the grand jury. So this grand jury is not only being asked whether to indict somebody, it is also being asked to help establish what happened, and its findings feed into completing the death certificate with a cause and manner of death. That matters, because a lot of people online are treating this as a simple yes or no. Either somebody gets charged or the case is finished. That is not how this works. This proceeding can produce a determination about the death without producing an indictment against anybody. Dubé's read is that at this stage, they may not yet know whether there is a homicide, may not have a settled cause of death, and have combined the cause of death question and the criminal question into a single proceeding so both can be resolved in one place. Then Nancy asks whether a grand jury usually does what the presenter wants and raises the old line about a grand jury indicting a ham sandwich. He says yes, they will. That cuts both ways, and only one direction usually gets discussed. A presenter who believes a crime occurred can generally obtain an indictment. A presenter who does not believe one occurred can generally obtain a no bill. In a closed proceeding, the posture of the person standing in that room matters a great deal. So here is where that hour leaves us. There is an account from a woman who says she saw an argument over a phone escalate into a physical fight involving Nolan Wells and several other people. She limited her statement to what she says she personally observed. She says supporting footage exists. None of it is verified. Its main weakness is identification rather than credibility, and its value depends almost entirely on whether it went to investigators and whether that footage carries a timestamp. There is forensic commentary indicating that the second autopsy did not document the injury pattern you would expect from a serious fight. That has to be weighed against decomposition, against the fact that the account does not actually claim he was beaten, and against the fact that the state's report has still not been released. There is a discrepancy in a boat name that is probably clerical and could matter anyway. There is water evidence suggesting the recovery was consistent with a drowning near where he was last seen, which the autopsy will either support or overturn. And there is a district attorney who has confirmed this is going to a grand jury in a system where that grand jury may be asked to determine the cause of death itself. What there is not, still, is an answer, not for the public and not for the family. If you know anything about where Nolan Wells was on that island after 5 o'clock that afternoon, do not post it online. Call the Jackson County Sheriff's Office at 228-769-3063. There is a $125,000 reward for information leading to the truth about what happened to him. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we will cover the grand jury outcome as soon as it is public. And share this with anyone following the case, because accurate information protects the people who had nothing to do with this just as much as it helps find anyone who did. I will see you on the next one.